Hello people, welcome back to my channel. This is Ranjiraj and hope you are enjoying this Python skill series. So today we'll be covering about what is the tuple data type in Python. So before that, let's understand three important points when we create any tuple data type in Python. So first is what we call as immutability. So if you see other data types or data structures like list or dictionary or even you have the strings, then in all these data structures you basically can do some kind of modifications on your created data. But tuple is one such data structure, in fact, where you cannot do the mutation, or like mutation means like addition or subtraction, or you can add remove elements into that. So once it is created in some memory area, and then it is saved as it is, so means you cannot do any kind of further activities over it. So that is what immutability is. Next, it is a sequence data type, means it stores element one after the other, and so it has the same indexing scheme as that of the list. So it starts from 0, and so up till the length of the elements, whatever it is, it takes the index, so on and so forth. The third important point is like it generates or it keeps heterogeneous elements, so that is also the same even with the list data structure. So in that also you can put different elements of different data types like boolean, string, integer, float, complex. So that is also possible even with the tuple data structure. So let's begin. So first of all, what we do is we create a tuple. So for that, uh, the tuple creation is realized with the help of this symbol. So now what this means is you are assigning that is an empty tuple and to this t. So now t contains some empty tuple. So if I run this, you don't obtain anything. But if I type t like this, so that means whatever you have assigned, that is to the right hand side, that you can show here, or that you can see basically. So this is the empty list. Now what we want is we want to add some elements into this. So for the time being, what we'll do is we will do static input, that is we will hard code. So later we'll do how we can do like from the user stream or the input stream. So so whenever you input any values into a table, make sure like you keep these two parentheses, and inside this you can put the elements like this. So now this basically has these many elements, and so now if I print t, you can see the output, that is it contains four different elements, 10, 20, 30 and 40. Now what I want to do is I want to print the list elements out of this. So there are two ways by which you can do this. So we have learned about the loop control or the iterative control like while and for loop. So with the help of that control structure, we'll be mainly iterating over this elements. So first let us see how we can do with while loop. So for that we want a variable. So we keep I is equal to 0, and then we write the keyword while. And now I want to do this activity, or I want to print this until the list elements. So for that we have some method called as length, len. So you can see here length takes one parameter called as object. It returns the number of items in a container. So length of items in t. So we will have this condition, so it will check whether what is the length or whatever is the length. So here we have the length as 4. So I will be running from 0 to 3. So in 0 to 3 index, it will have all the 4 elements. So that is the basic logic behind this. Now I want to print the value of each of this element. So remember, like in list also we have said like it has the index position that starts from 0, and so in this also we have the indexing, that it starts from uh, t of 0, t of 1, t of 2. So this is basically used for accessing the index. So this remains same for any data structure if you want to access each and individual element. Next, we want also to increment, like we want to move forward in the tuple. So for that, we'll keep this increment, that is I plus is equal to 1. And then if we run this, what we get is we have 10, 20, 30, and 40. Now we have also learned like we can do something like this, that is in this way. So it will print in a horizontal way as opposed to the vertical fashion. Now let us do something like say I want to print the ID. So we have learned ID is just for telling you what is the memory reference or the memory address of this. So we can do with this tuple also. So we get something like this. Now why it printed here? Because we have learned that is end works for some print statements. So this is, if this was a print statement, so this is like it gives you the output in the console, so it will print after this particular values. So this is the idea of this basically. So now this particular id printing has certain significance, so that will be explained when we come here. That is all about the immutability. So the main discussion of making this tuple data structure originally was to solve some problems among students or learners who are learning data science or Python, especially in Python 3, when they come across this tuple data structure. So tuple has these properties like when I said about the immutability, but many of them when they do this kind of different operations, then they find like tuple is mutable. So they have this certain kind of doubts and confusions, like some said like it is immutable but we can do it, or it's all those kind of stuffs. So this discussion will be all regarding like to clear those doubts, and on what basis these people are saying like tuple is mutable. Basically it's immutable, so that is you have to accept the fact like it is built internally in that way, like you cannot mutate it. So for that what we do is we want to print the element. So say like the while statement what we have done, so that can be even simplified with the help of for loop, that is just a one liner. Say we have for I in our tuple, that is t, we want print the element, so that is as simple as that. So you get all the elements one after the other. If I put the end is equal to, it will be in a horizontal way. Now what we want to do is even with this what we can achieve is like if we did like this. So if I want to print the squares of these numbers whatever is there, so it will be first, that is 10 into 10 or 10 square, then 20 square, 30 square, 40 square. So you can do simple kind of things without even accessing the individual elements or printing outside. You can do everything inside the for loop. So that is the power of the for loop with tuple. Next our main discussion is like about immutability. Yeah, so we are moving to that itself. So in list we have learned something about the slicing operator. So slicing operator is also used with this tuple data structure, also means you can slice some data. Slicing means it will be a restricted view of what you currently have. So we have this t, so we put this square brackets and say we have like this. So what it should ideally print is this way. So this is the usual thing. And so if I start from 0, then it also should print the same way. So there is no doubt in this. And if I want like say this is the stop parameter, so now this has index from, so this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So if I put 3 here, so now the element 40 is missing in this. So what happened? So now you say like your tuple is modified. So this is the reason. So if I now so say first let me save this in t, and now if I print t here, So now you can see the tuple is modified. Now people will say like you have modified the tuple, but you said like it is immutable. So how is this possible, or why is it called immutability? So the main reason lies is that's why I printed the address of this here. So this was the original memory address. Now when I printed this, what happened is like, say like we print t, and also we print the id of t. So now if you can see here, that is if you just read the last four or last three, that is this was 1768, this is 1640. So what basically it is like, it is referencing to two different memory locations in the main memory. But what you see from outside, it's like it's changed, that is it got mutated, but internally it is not. Internally somewhere in this memory address it still has this 10, 20, 30, and 40, but when you did the slicing, it creates another new tuple at this memory location, that is this is the address basically. Then what you can also do is to this tuple, that is now since we have this, so we will do that activity here itself. So now what I do is I have t is equal to, so now my tuple contains 10, 20, 30, and 40. I will add three more elements to it. So that what I will do is I will use the concatenation, that is now this is not the compound assignment, so it does not works here. So just make sure like you write in this way itself. So I put 40, 50, and 60, and then I want the print. So I will print t, and I want the id of t. So let's see what this has to offer. Yeah, so you can see the first print statement, that is which you can see here. Now this is the sliced version, so that is a restricted view of the tuple. So now just see the address, don't see the values inside the tuple, just see the address. So this is 51640, and when we added this, so this is a mutation, this is also a mutation, both are basically mutation. But here when we incremented, or when we added more elements, that is three more elements, now this is to some other memory location. So that is a basic simple difference. So internally it just creates another tuple at some another memory location. So the original tuple will still remain unchanged. So that is the main motive of this immutability, and this is how you should do. Like you should not see what is happening outside, but internally what is there and where it is kept, you should analyze that. So analysis is the basis for all the data science activities. So in data science what you basically do is you do the EDA, that is exploratory data analysis. So analysis is the important thing. So if you have this method, so check with each and everything, so is it happening or not. Now you might be thinking like this was the same case with list. So does list also has different memory referencing, and does this all discussion happens with list also or not? So for that, let us take the list example also. So we'll do that with list even, and we'll see like how it affects, or is there any difference in that. So for that, say I will create a static list, and I have say elements 100, 200, and 300. Now I'll write a print statement, and I'll print L here, and I just want the ID. I just want the ID of L. So ID of L. Now what I do is in list we have many different methods, but in tuple we have very few methods we cannot remove. So we have something called as remove. So if you watch the previous session of list, there I have discussed about the remove method. So this is nothing but you write remove and pass which value you want to remove from this list. And now after the remove, what I basically do is I print the list again. And so then what I do is I print the ID of L. Okay, so it was 200. Yeah. So now what you can see here, so the output, like first it was like 100, 200, 300 as you inputted into the list. It is stored at this memory address location, that is 57096. But when you removed it, now this is what is called as mutability. Now at the same memory location or the same memory address, 200 got removed, but it did not create some other list. So now this is with respect to the same list that we have. So now this is not immutable. So this is actually what means by mutability, and not what you see in the console. So not what you see from L, but what you see from id of L. So you have to look for the memory reference. How is it referring internally, how it is stored, whether it is creating some duplicate structures or not. So this discussion was regarding like to create, not to create but to clear the doubt regarding the immutability, which is uh, seen in Python. So you have to check for the ID. So that is the basis for this discussion. Next, we have something called as packing in Tuple. So packing is nothing but if you have a backpack, what you do is you put certain items into it. You, if you are a college student or a school student, then you will put your books, then you will put your pencil, tiffin box, lunch box, then water bottle, and all other books. So that is basically packing. Or if you want to pack, like if you are a like travel person, then you will pack different items in your bag. So that is the same thing. So the name also goes with that itself. So packing is nothing but you pack different items into it. So say let's we have A. So we keep some books, and in B, say we keep some pens, and in C we have say tiffin box or lunch box. So now what we do is, now I want to put everything in one statement into our tuple. So now say like if I have a tuple like say H, or in fact I'll use the same tuple itself. So T is equal to, I'll write A comma B comma C, and then if I print this, you have this particular tuple. So it doesn't make any sense like you add to the original tuple or previous tuple. So this particular thing, what I've done here has nothing to do with what I've done in this particular portion, because it's obviously happening in some other memory location. And if you want to confirm it, then you can print the id. So just print and check the id whether it is conflicting this with or not. So it has some obviously different ID than from what you have seen here. That is, so that is a basic discussion. So if you create or if you add elements or do slicing or do any kind of operation, it will be created in some new memory address. That's it. So this was about the packing. So packing is like you put everything into one. So here the packing happens. Next, similarly, if we pack something, then at some point of time you have to unload it or unpack. So for that we have unpacking. So how does this work? So for that also we have this tuple. So in this we put some books. Then we have lunch box, and say we have eraser, something like this. And now what we are doing is we want to unpack this. So unpacking, it will be done one by one. So for one by one, what we'll have is we have to create one variable for each of this. So let us say we have D, E, and F. So each of these three variables will be assigned to T. Why? Because T contains three different items, so each of them will be stored in T. So D will be having books, E will be having lunchbox, F will be having eraser, and so on. And so this is the unpacking. And say if I want to print the element, so the easy way is we implement a for loop. So for I in t, what we have is we print the elements. So print I, and if I run this, what you can see is you obtain books, lunchbox, and eraser. And so one interesting thing to note, like if I what if I print like id of I. So if I do this operation, you can see like this is not one after the other. So you can see like 376, 136, or 920. Even the number itself is different. So it starts from somewhere like here. So from this position, it has some different address. So internally also it is stored in some structure, but not necessarily in a sequence. But we call sequence because it is stored in one after the other, like books, pens, and tiffin box, how we input. So internally it has some different data structure. So that gets into the internal, but you have to do certain kinds of analysis over this, like you have different methods you can play around with this. So the more you give your time to this Python programming and all these functions, you'll gain more insights over this. Now so that was a discussion of unpacking. Now what we have is we have something called as repetition operator. Now we have covered a different video altogether on operators. We had assignment operator, membership operator, identity operator. Then we have relational operator, boolean, not boolean. We had logical bitwise operators and many. We covered around 6 to 7 operators. Then we had something like we have the uh, replacement operator, which was mainly used for speech to text conversion in that application. Now here in tuple we have something called as a repetition operator. So there is no special thing about it, but just the way we write in tuple, it is used or called as repetition operator. So that is a basic difference. So let us understand with help of one example. So it is very simple. So we have this I will not create this again, so I will copy this, and what I do is I write the print. So now this becomes a like routine, like whenever you do it, it becomes like easy for you to understand what is happening inside. So you should do this kind of activity whenever you do programming, or if you do debugging also, this is also a very good practice. So now the repetition operator is done with the help of this multiplication sign. So this is not like what you do is you basically multiply, or if this was with integer, so instead what I do is I put integers here. So say that will be much easier for you to understand, and say this is 11 and this is 12. So with this statement you might be thinking like it will be 10 into 2 and 11 into 2 and 12 into 2. So that does not happen here, but instead it will be duplicated basically. So that is a repetition. So as the name suggests, it is repetition. So since you are using this multiplication, it will repeat that elements twice in the list. So that will be redundant storage, duplicate values that will be storing. And then I want to print this statement here. And after this, what I do is, if I run this, you can see like it has the first print 10, 11, 12, and in the second print it was 10, 11, 12, and again 10, 11, 12. But the memory address, if you check, these are at two different locations. So that is the basic repetition operator. There is no special operator that we are using, or like special symbol from the keyboard, but just the multiplication when it is used in tuple, or when it is used with some numbers and the tuple, it becomes the repetition operator. Now what we have is we have something called as comparison operator. So with list also the comparison is possible. So for that what I have is I have say like now I said like list can contain heterogeneous elements. So let's create a list which has some heterogeneous elements. So I have some value like say 10, and 3.4, and say I have a name Tony and false, and I have I plus 4j. So you can see their colors itself got changed, but is it like of different data type? So for that, what we'll do is we'll just print the um, type of each of this. So how do we print the type? So for that, we have a built-in function that is type. That is simple. So type of I, if I print this and if I run this, what I can see is first element is of integer type, second element is of float type, third element is of string type, then false is of boolean type, 1 plus 4j is of complex type. So now what I do is I have say one more list like this, and say let me copy this, and I have a list j here, and if I run this again, or since we know like the data types are like we can see what has happened inside, we'll just run these two, no output obviously. But now what we can do is in comparison operator we can compare these two, so we can do something like k is equal to j, it will return true. So obviously the list elements are the elements are same but the list names are different, so you get this value as true. And I can also use with this, so it should be false. Is it greater? It should be false. So this was all about this. And now what I do is if I change this element and if I write is k less than j, so is this operation basically possible? So the answer is yes. Why? Because we have all these elements same as to these elements in j, but the first element is less than the second element, so that's why it returned true. So if you do this, it will return false. So this type of comparisons in list elements, so it will basically check each and every element which is there in the list and it will do accordingly. So that is the basic comparison operator. Now what we get into is like we have one important method that is called as the eval method. So where is eval methods used or why it is used? So it is used whenever we are taking input from the user. So whenever user enters any input, he doesn't know like how to input the element. So he sometimes may put like with space, or he may put with not space, without any space, or he may put like with some semicolon or colon or comma. So different kinds of things are possible. So for that in tuple what we have something called as a constructor. So if you have a java background or other programming languages background, then there you mainly use the constructor of the class. So here we have constructor of the data structure. Means say like I have say a data structure, like we are learning right now tuple, we have this tuple type. So we have this tuple type, so it also creates an empty tuple as opposed to what we have seen here. So in this we created an empty tuple in this way, but we can also create a tuple by calling the tuple constructor. So this is also possible. Now to this what I'm putting is I'm putting the input. So now I want to enter the elements from the user. So I want the user to enter the elements. So now what I do is I'll basically print the elements whatever I have. So I have the elements, so print y, and yeah, that's it. Just this for our discussion. So we have the elements, say I input 23, and so basically since we learned lists are separated with commas, we'll put the commas, and 34 and then 80 and then 110. Now if you observe like the elements that we have entered was 23, 56, 34, 80 and 100. But when this list took or when we applied the tuple type constructor, what it basically did is it considered each of the elements, including the commas that were there inside, as the elements or the tuple elements. So this 23 was split into 2 and 3 and it was considered as one string. Then we have this comma. So this comma that I'm talking, that is also considered as an object. Even this 5, 6, the comma after that, everything. So this is not the way we want. So if I check the type of like y, what I get is I get tuple, but this is not the way we want, or like this is not, or this will not give us any kind of important significance in order to do perform our analysis. So we don't want this kind of thing to happen. So for that, what we mainly use is we have this eval method. So that is basically an evaluation, means it will evaluate the input stream that is coming from the user, and it will see how the input is being sent or typed by the user, and it will decode it and it will return to you as it is. So now if it is comma separated, user will get to know, or like it is he wants to enter the tuple, but how does the compiler understand like user wants tuple or list or some other data structure. So it will basically use the method that is eval, and with that it will just decode like what the user wants. So better we write or understand with the help of some code, lines of code. So say I have this x, and instead, or in fact we can do here itself. So instead of this tuple, we have this eval. So eval is as simple as that. So if I want to enter elements like 20, 10, 20, 30 and 40, now this is the way you want. So now this is considered as a tuple with all the elements which you have inputted. So eval is one such method where whenever you take the input from the user in a series manner or serial manner, one after the other, whether it's white space or comma or any other separator, you basically append some kind of other methods in order to characterize what is the separating character to it, so that it can be stored internally in the way you want. So that is a basic usage of eval. So henceforth, whenever we do programming or whenever we take input from the user, so we'll be mainly dealing with different kinds of data structures we have seen so far. So in the future videos we'll also will be seeing other data structures. So basically whenever we take the input from the user, we use the eval function. Now what we want is we want to so that was all regarding the eval method. Now with the help of this eval method, what we'll do is we'll create a small program. Now that program will be to add, or it will be doing the sum of even numbers or some of the odd numbers, but it will be not with the tuple data type, it will be related with the list data type. So some more part or some more things that I have not discussed will be coming up here. So I cannot discuss everything in one video, but whenever we do programming or in some small steps, we'll be adding certain things so that we get to know like where it is actually used. So else it will be meaningless, like if I tell in a separate video, and if I don't show the practical usage, then it won't be helpful in any way to you. So for that discussion will be as and when we'll create a new programs or some programs, we'll get to know like where and what it is used, so what you have learned and where you have to use. So that is all about the applications in data science. So that habit you have to keep. So yeah. So now what we do is we want to create a program. Now the problem statement is we want to build a program in Python, and it has to print the sum of even numbers and some of the odd numbers. Now this will be done with the help of list. So in list, what I have not said is something called as list comprehension. So list comprehension. list comprehension. So what is list comprehension? So we better write the program. So what we have is, say we have an even sum, that is es, and then we have some odd sum, that is os. So these are two variables. We can do this way also. So this is one other coding practice that we see in Python. So this basically, it's like if you have, say, like if you have learned like a is equal to 1 and b is equal to 1, then what you basically write is a is equal to b is equal to 1. So this similar thing when you write in programming or in Python, you can use this way, or you can write in this way. So this is one coding technique. So there will be many coding technique whenever we do different kinds of activities or analysis on the data. We'll be writing small things, so which cannot be made separately. Along with the program, you will understand. Yeah. So what we now do is we want to create a list. So this example is of list comprehension. So we'll create a list. So G will be a list. Now it is an empty list. Now in this, what we do is we call the eval function, and in eval function will pass a variable. So x will be some iterator, so it will iterate throughout all the elements that user inputs. And now what we write is we put this for x. So x is nothing but your iterator, what we have kept inside eval. And after this, for each input that the user will be entering, now we'll instruct the user like enter the elements as comma separated. So now by this, what happens is, like whenever user will be entering into the stream, he will enter as comma separated. So he will not enter with a white space, or he will not enter with a tab space, he will not enter with colon, semicolon, but we are explicitly mentioning like you have to enter as comma separated. So, but how will our compiler understand like what is comma, or what is like colon, semicolon, what is white space? So for that, we have learned something called as split, that we have seen in the list video. So that was the previous video. So in that we have seen something called as list. So in list we have seen a method split. So it can be split, or it can split elements with the help of comma or any other elements separator which we can have. So I'll basically write split here, and inside this I write the comma. So now since user will enter all the elements in comma separated format or comma separated values, it will split these elements. Now this kind of things, whenever you do the data science projects, or whenever you have this data set, so not almost all of the data sets will be in Excel, but some will be of comma separated. So in that, basically you have to use this kind of things. So I'm also discussing regarding in perspective to that. So now since we have in comma separated, so now what we want to do is we want to print this element. So we'll see whether how the elements looks like, or whether it's okay or not. So for that, we'll basically do the debugging. So enter the elements. So we will enter the elements in comma separated. So user will enter. So now space after this won't be an issue. So I can put like this and say like this. Yeah, so it perfectly works fine. So whether if you put a space after the comma or before the comma or anything like that, it will not consider, because you have kept this splitting criteria, that is split, or just make sure like comma is a separator, so that you can well space this element in your list. So that was the first part of this. Now what I want to do is I want to uh, check for each elements out of this. Now since user has entered all these elements, now I want to check whether these elements is a even number or odd number. So that is a very simple. If that number is divisible by 2, that is even number. Means the remainder, if it is 0, that means it's an even number. Else it is not an even number. Means it's an odd number. So it is simple. So for that I will have to use a for loop. So for I in, I will use the range function that we have seen. So this will be coming henceforth in almost all of the programs will be writing after this. So just make sure like this x and this I has nothing to do with each other. So this was for this list comprehension. So list comprehension is nothing but what I have written here. So this is list comprehension. Whenever you do this one liner kind of for loop and eval into that, that is list comprehension. So now in range, what we want to do is now we can't put any index or like value for n or something like that. Instead, what we put is we will check with the length of g, whatever our list was. According to that, it will create some indexes up till n minus 1, and it will put the elements into that, and it will store and process whatever we write after that. Now uh, since now this for loop is iterating, now I want to check if that g of I means each index. So if g of 0, so now here g of 0 was 10, g of 1 was 230, g of 2 was 50, and so on. So I want to check whether each element, so for each element we have g of I, and what I will do is I will check the remainder. So for checking the remainder we have to use the modulus. So if it is modulus of 2 means this particular statement means if the remainder is 0 or not. So if it is 0, that means it is an even number. So we want to add it to the list of even numbers or set of even numbers. So we have this variable from the start, that is es. So that I will basically uh, add, that is es is equal to es plus g of I. So for that I'll basically use the shorthand operator. So that is the compound assignment operator, and I'll write g of I simply. Yeah. So now this was the part, like if the remainder was 0, then I'll put into es and it will be incremented. So whenever in the future I get any even number, it will be doing the same kind of activity, or it will be putting in s. Now if this is not the case, then I want to create a else block. Now in else block it will be os, instead of es it will be os. So in case of odd number, if the remainder is not equal to 0, or if it is some other number, then it will be going to os. So well, this is the small program. Now what I want to do is I just want to print the elements. It is as simple as that. So I'll write sum of even numbers in g. So g was our list, and say like I print es here. So that will be the value, and with os I want to have like this. So sum of odd numbers. So that is simple. So now if I run this program, so now user is saying like it wants to enter the user in a comma separated value. So I will just enter the elements like 10, then 11, then 12, 13, and 14. So now if I see, first I got the output as the list, then the sum of even numbers. So even numbers are 10, 12, and 14. If you take the sum of these, you get 36, and for 11 and 13 you get as 24. So you can do similar kind of operations, and you can check and practice. So practice is what it will make you a data scientist or something in future. So make sure like you practice all these things again and again, and try new programs so that you get a good hand over the Python programming. So well, that was all regarding the tuple data structure in Python 3. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. We want to get educated about this video. Please do like, share, comment, and if you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching this video.